I am here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, we have got a fascinating story coming out of the UK that no one is reporting on. Thank you, Max Blumenthal. Thank you, The Grey Zone, for uncovering this story. And it really does have to do with much of the information war that is taking place, a lot of the information war that has been targeting Russia, coming out of the US and coming out of the UK, and they have targeted Russia pretty aggressively. But this actually looks at it from the other angle and exposes a UK, what they call a network of networks, think tanks, nonprofits, journalists, social influencers, politicians who have been working in unison in the United Kingdom and in Scotland via various institutions and various government-funded organizations to spread the information war and attack not only Russia, but to me, the part that was incredible is they were attacking opponents of the current government, the current conservative government, most notably Jeremy Corbyn. Get into what is going on here with regard to what you'll describe into detail as to what's known as the Integrity Initiative and the what's the other one called? The Institute for
Statecraft. I mean, these
what names?
Well, indeed, what names? Indeed. Now, I mean, this. We only have bits and pieces of this puzzle, but enough to give us an idea that this is a major information war campaign. Of course, the British government, to the extent that it's talking about this at all, is talking very little, saying very little, and the media in Britain is barely covering this. It's trying to spin it as an attempt by Britain to counter Russia's alleged information war. To me, it looks, on the contrary, very much like an attempt by the British authorities to take control of the information space. Now, I have to provide a little history here. It has long been known that in Britain, various journalists and various people who are connected in the media and various public organizations have various connections with the British government, with the British intelligence services, with what you might call the deep state. Indeed, to a certain extent, they are part of the deep state. I remember that there was a journalist, for example, in the 1980s called Sandy Gall, who used to show films from Afghanistan and used to go with various Mujahideen fighters there. And it turned out that he was very much involved with MI6. So, and he was on British television, and we were all led to think that he was an independent journalist. So something like this has been going on for something like this go on for a long time. This seems to be on a very much bigger scale. And moreover, what is really interesting about it is that the British military and its intelligence services, but specifically the military itself, seems to be involved in organizing and orchestrating these activities, which, to the extent that we know, seem to be operating from some kind of base or bases in Scotland. And one of the things they've been doing is, absolutely correctly said, they've been developing clusters of influential people, including people in the media, but in all sorts of other branches, who are there to basically promote this same anti-Russian narrative. Now, some of these people, I'm afraid, are people we've long known. I mean, people like Luke Harding, Ed Lucas, Anne Applebaum, they're all there. I think actually I'm wrong. I think Luke Harding may not have been there. I don't think he needs to be. But say Ed Lucas was. David Aranovich in the Times was mentioned. He's the only person, to my knowledge, who's denied anything, any actual connection with all of this. What is very interesting is that these people, most of them, Ed Lucas, to his credit, did admit that he was involved and that he was part of one of these clusters, but said, that there's nothing wrong and this is perfectly innocuous. But if it was so innocuous, why keep it secret? So we are looking at what was clearly a covert information campaign, and it's part of this large information war that the British state has been fighting against Russia for a very long time.
What do you make of the fact, okay, you mentioned that the UK military is involved in this, but these organizations, the Integrity Initiative and these organizations, which are operating in secret offices, actually, so they have bases in Scotland, but they're operating as well, from what I understood from reading the article on the Grey Zone, that they were actually operating in a basement in central London as well.
Absolutely,
and they were very protective about letting anyone enter those offices. But what do you make of the fact they've been funded by NATO and they've been funded by Facebook as well?
Well, indeed. Well, and
they have neocon connections. Going further, they also have neocon connections to the U.S.
Well, first of all, I mean, the neocon connections to the US. I mean, we've discussed this before. I mean, the neocons are, let's be quite clear about this, allies of the deep state in the United States. And they're allies of the deep state in Britain. It is completely unsurprising that they are involved in all of this. In fact, some of them, you could almost call them, the sort of vanguard of the deep state. They are there in the media and in academia and in the NGOs and the think tanks to basically promote the policies which we associate with the deep state, which are very much policies of confrontation at the moment with Russia. So it's not surprising that they're involved. It's also not surprising at all that the United States and its various agencies are also involved. In fact, I am sure we are going to find out eventually but an awful lot more about this operation than we have known about up to now, that we've learned up to now. But the interesting thing is this. It's all been done in secret. Organizations like Facebook, which are increasingly acting in a kind of parastatal way. I mean, we've discussed this before. Are they publishers? Are they serving a public state service? If they're doing the second, who are they working for? Are they working for governments or are they independent companies? They operate in a strange grey zone, and we see that they're now very much part of this information control system. But the key point is, if all of these people are operating, doing something that is appropriate and above board, why is it all being done so secretly? I am not surprised that NATO is funding it. I'm not surprised, I'm sorry to say, that Facebook is involved. I'm not surprised the neocons are involved. If it is wrong, it should be done in the open, and we should all know about who these people are and the fact that they're working in concert with each other.
Yeah, everything that they accuse Russia of doing is in fact what they are actually doing in secret, but now is being exposed. I mean, they are. Exactly. This is a huge propaganda and information war
on a titanic scale,
right?
Like I've never seen before at any time in history. There have been propaganda wars in the past. There was, of course, between the Allies and the Germans during the Second World War, between the Soviets and the West during the Cold War. There's been nothing like this, because this is an attempt to capture control of information space. This is what this is all about. This is what it looks like to me. And people assume that what they read in the newspapers is independent, and that the newspapers are independent agencies, and organizations like Facebook are independent agencies. And it is now becoming increasingly clear that in reality they are soldiers in the information war. And what we know, because we've heard an awful lot about the so-called Russian side of it, but it seems, from what we're learning now, that the side of it that's being waged in the West is on a far more sophisticated and extensive scale.
Yeah, and I mean, if you connect the dots with Facebook, it does seem, I think you're right, Facebook has been captured by the state, whether you call it the deep state, whatever, NATO, whatever you want to call it, the elitists, the globalists, because, you have Facebook, it's connected with the Atlantic Council. The Atlantic Council is connected to NATO. You have Facebook now funding organizations like the Integrity Initiative and these organizations, which are not only spreading Russian propaganda, anti-Russian propaganda, they're also smearing people like Jeremy Corbyn. Get into that a little bit as well, because to me, this is the most worrying part.
Yes, well, can I just say, of course, this is indeed the most worrying part, and it relates again to what is happening in the United States. And this is where I want to bring in Russiagate, because what we're seeing is that all the dirty tricks that have been used against the Russians, against all sorts of people all around the world, are now being used by the same agencies against political leaders who are seen as a challenge, as a threat to the political establishment and to the interests of the deep state in these countries. So we see methods that the United States' intelligence agencies have historically often used to promote color revolutions and regime change in other countries be imported back to the United States and used against Donald Trump. And that is what Russiagate is. And we're now seeing something very similar starting to happen in Britain. Jeremy Corbyn has been the subject of relentless campaigns ever since he became leader of the Labour Party. The reason those campaigns have been launched against him is because he is opposed to the regime change wars. He wants to change radically the direction of British foreign policy. He's known to be a skeptic about NATO. He's known to be a very strong skeptic about the EU. He is known to be a skeptic about the whole neo-globalist, neoliberal economic system, even if he supports some of its social policies, and he wants improved relations with Russia. So what is now happening is that all of these agencies are now turning against him, and they're using the information tools that they're using against the Russians, they're turning it against him in just the same way as has happened against Donald Trump in the United States.
Alexander, it's agencies, but I want your take on this. You mentioned the UK military and the UK government is also behind a lot of these groups.
Absolutely.
What does this mean that they're going after Jeremy Corbyn, the government organizations, the government apparatus?
Well, what it means is that democracy is in danger in Britain as it is in the United States, because political leaders are no longer able to campaign and win elections in an open and straightforward way on a level playing field. To what extent that has ever been true, by the way, it's historically problematic, but that has been the theory. Now we know that agencies of the British state, in alliance with establishment politicians, and including intelligence services and disinformation units of the British state, as of the American state, are trying to control political processes in Britain as they are in the United States itself, to predetermine outcomes and to make sure that certain outcomes that the British and the American people might want do not happen. Now, that is an obvious threat to democracy, and it is something that is a matter of, should be of huge concern to people both in Britain and in the United States and everywhere else in the West.
Yeah, whether you agree with Corbyn's politics, I think, is not the question here. The fundamental issue is that you have the government apparatus going after politicians or the opposition party, and they're going after them pretty aggressively.
That is exactly correct. Now, as I said, I know lots of people don't like many of the policies that Jeremy Corbyn has. There are many things he supports which I don't agree with either. The same, I should add, applies to Donald Trump. There are things he does I don't approve of. But the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump is the constitutionally elected president of the United States. Jeremy Corbyn is the leader of Her Majesty's opposition in Britain. He might very well become Prime Minister of Britain. You cannot overturn or control election outcomes and the political process in the United States and in Britain by targeting politicians in this way, using the state to do that in this way, using disinformation practices in that way, using British government money to do it in the case of Jeremy Corbyn, and core states in which those things happen, democracies any longer. And anybody who cares about democracy should be very worried about it.
Yeah, we'll link to this article and this report by Max Blumenthal for the Grays. We'll put it in the description. It's a very good piece of investigative journalism. And it's a story, Alexander, that you mentioned at the beginning of the video that no one is covering in the UK
Absolutely.
at all.
It's been almost a total media blackout on it. There's been one or two little bits and bobs in the Times. I should quickly add, for our viewers' interest, that, of course, to the extent that the British government is admitting anything has happened, they're blaming Russia. They're saying that all this information about the Integrity Initiative was leaked by Russia, and perhaps it was not a coincidence that a whole series of articles then appeared attacking the Russian news agency Sputnik, which by coincidence has offices in Scotland, and publishing name and shame articles about some of the people who work for that. Many people think that that was some kind of retaliation for the publication of the details of the Integrity Initiative. Right. I don't know that it was anything to do with Russia, by the way, that we got this information. But, you know, that is what they always say. That has now become the convenient excuse whenever these situations arise.
Russia did it. Well, the article is Inside the Temple of Covert Propaganda, the Integrity Initiative, and the UK's Scandalous Information War. And it is authored by Mohammed El-Mazi and Max Blumenthal. So Mohammed El-Mazi as well, via the Grey Zone Project.
Indeed so. And can I repeat again, my underlying point, if this is all fine, if it was the Russians doing bad things, why keep it secret? That seems to me to be the giveaway that we're looking at a covert operation and one that the authorities in Britain do not want the British public to be made aware of.
Right. Inside the Temple of Covert Propaganda. That's the key.
Exactly.
All right. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, click that subscribe button. Click that notifications bell. Smash that like button. 20% off the Duran shop all throughout December. We still have a couple more days. Pick up a t-shirt. It helps us out a lot. And you can also get a copy of this show on iTunes and on Soundcloud in audio format. Take care, everybody.